And I've been emailing with, learn about our course, to register for our course, receive the assignments and other information. And I will continue to be in that for the duration of this course on NTDs and WASP. So just everyone on this, but in order to check your audio, conference. And so you and then you call using computer, open the window, and be able to test your speaker. If your microphone doesn't work on the computer you're using, that's fine, because it's using the microphone. If you are connected properly, and next name, you should have headphones, which means you are muted. And just muted so everyone here to Emory host. In the chat, send a message to, whether the presenter or some other. So just let's see. Hopefully. Okay. So we're working in over 27 countries, listed a wide range of participants. Have representatives, of course. So here, you're one of the lucky ones who got enrolled in time. Oops. Back. Via email for this reading that some of you were able to complete. And before the module, we will email you read to supplement goals. And there will be information about assignment 2, November, in May, which is early December. And so if at any point your connection is hear something, you can be read webinar. We will email it to you the following day. Who and you'll email me with any questions, comments, or suggestions throughout this. And the Emory host will also send a message to those who perhaps can't hear us. And with you, Stephanie Ogden, coordinator for the NTD WASH project in Ghana. So let me hand it over to her.
Just a quick sound test. Can you hear me okay? Great. Thank you all again for joining this course. Really excited to have a representation from fun-wide, and we're excited to get your perspectives on this. Ogden, and I am the WASH NTD coordinator for an organization called the Task Force for Global Health, the Senior Water Policy Advisor for CARE International. And I've been working over the past 2 years or so helping to facilitate collaboration between the WASH and affected tropical diseases sectors. So this course is an exciting culmination of some of the dialogue we've had over the past 2 years. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the many folks that have helped to put this course together. It takes quite a community to put a course like this together. I want to say thank you, and Carrie Gallo and Courtney McGuire, in particular, Carrie Gallo, Children Without Worms, and Courtney McGuire of Emory University for the of putting together background information for this course and for the manuals that will be coming out in the next few months. Will also be an important component of collaboration. And I acknowledge Erica Meyer of Emory and Kelly Alexander of Emory University, who are the facilitators of the course and who will continue to be, as Kelly said. So everyone who's put all of this together. A quick bit of background on why we think this course is relevant and why we think it's a timely course. Been increasing attention over the past few years to a group of diseases called the neglected tropical diseases. Many of you know the diseases that do not cause on the whole large mortality do cause very morbidity and very prevalent, affecting more than 1 billion people worldwide. Of the NTDs as a group, and irreversible blindness, disability and disfigurement, anemia, have long-term health and social consequences, including compromised cognitive capacity and educational attainment, decreased productivity, and exclusion, just to start. So we feel that this is a very important issue, and it has emerged in the last couple of years as an increasingly important issue. These diseases are treatable term. I'll talk a little bit more about that later today, but also preventable diseases. And with increasing attention to the neglected tropical diseases and their global impact, there's been awareness and commitment to activities that contribute not only to treatment, but to the prevention of infection. Increasing awareness among the community and the NTD sector, several of the NTDs want central to this prevention environment. So the NTD sector has begun to, in a sense, reach out to the water sector to greater collaboration and acknowledge this fundamental role of WASH in the prevention of these diseases. There for the control or elimination of these diseases by 2020 of them, and in the years afterwards for others. Ambitious targets, and they are unlikely to be met without great attention to the WASH elements that contribute to prevention. Over the there have been a series of dialogues between the two sectors, dialogues, a series of practical steps for collaboration, and key gaps to be addressed have been defined. And ongoing dialogue are the elements that make up that today. Is an interesting recognition during this discussion that collaboration between the WASH and NTD sectors opportunities for mutual benefit between the WASH and NTD sectors. In this dialogue over the past couple of years, there was a seminal discussion at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in December of 2012. Key representatives of the WASH and NTD sectors to define very concretely the next steps. And of those, there were determined to be 4 key areas that might be important areas for WASH and NTD collaboration. I'll talk a little bit more about those today. Those include capacity building, advocacy policy and messaging, monitoring and data collection opportunities, and then research to continue to understand the relationship between WASH and NTDs. So what this course is, and it is not. So it's intended for practitioners of WASH programs and activities. Information here has been framed from the WASH perspective and is framed to be most relevant to those of you who are conducting WASH activities. It is an introduction to the NTDs. We are conscious that it is in the most relevant information to you as WASH practitioners relating to the NTDs and elevated to WASH programming. Modules to the overall course, and that you have the course objectives already. Versus today's course is an introduction to the NTDs, their global impact, to the approach of the NTD control sector, and of WASH within NTD control. The second, November 5th, and it's a module related to specifically to the interventions for NTD control, which are most relevant and effective for NTD control, due of the evidence that supports this. On module, and we'll look specifically at mapping tools used within the WASH and NTD communities, particularly the many emerging mapping tools to map disease prevalence, help to identify disease endemic communities and potential implementation. That session, we will also have a section on program monitoring tools, post-implementation monitoring, and the role that monitoring might play in joint progress between the WASH and NTD sectors. The December 3rd, and it's advocacy, policy, and messaging. That is how to make coherent messages between the NTD and WASH sectors, how to use the information that we're learning through this course to conduct joint advocacy mutual benefit and to elevate both issues in your countries of practice. Relevant to WASH practitioners, and what we hope that you as practitioners will be able to get out of it. Many, and we know that countries of practice will be decided. But of things, what we hope they get out of this course is understand, begin to measure and report that the WASH sector is already having on the NTDs. The nature of your programs and the activities that you're already conducting that account for an impact that we hadn't previously accounted for. We hope additional elements of NTD control that can be easily incorporated into WASH. And those elements, for example, like face washing for trachoma control, program elements that are not traditionally activities within the WASH sector, but be incorporated to have great impact on disease control. We hope practitioners to choose appropriate WASH interventions in the communities that we know or suspect are NTD endemic communities. So increased ability at the country level to map disease, to know where those diseases exist. They are endemic to the communities in which your programs, you're already running your programs, WASH interventions might have the most impact on disease. Will help additionally target NTD communities for WASH interventions. That endemicity of NTDs or the prevalence of NTDs may become a criteria for communities for WASH interventions. We hope the WASH sector as a whole and practitioners to engage in joint advocacy, both WASH and NTD issues among important stakeholders, both at the level and in your own countries of practice. We hope messages between the two sectors, between the sector and the NTD control sector, and the greater health sector, for effective health and hygiene behavior change messages. We see that the communications from different stakeholders are somewhat uncoordinated, and we hope that the information here will help to coordinate and consolidate that messaging for greater effect. And that the information here will help programs to demonstrate the relevance of WASH to donors that are interested in health objectives. And health has often a primary motivation for WASH programs, but we have the NTDs and the potential ability to measure impact of WASH on the NTDs will increase the perceived relevance of WASH among the health sector stakeholders and donors. We won't be able to achieve through this course that we have, that we all have similar expectations. We won't cover all of the neglected tropical diseases in detail, or even touch on many of them. There are a total of 13 or 17, and depending on which you talk to, won't cover all of them in detail, but rather will be looking specifically at the 5 diseases that are most closely related to WASH. 5 of the diseases with very high prevalence and impact on those diseases will comprise a great impact at a global scale. We won't, which is difficult. We will provide a method of measuring disease prevalence on your own. Will help you to find that information and partners who can help you to measure disease prevalence and impact on disease. And we include country-specific NTD information. As said, there are 20 won't be able to touch on country-specific disease and WASH information. Rather, we'll give a global overview and where to find that disease information and how to use it for yourself. Let me talk a little bit about the assumptions or the ground rules for this course and how we have approached this course as facilitators. We want you are busy. We know you are practitioners, and we want to respect your time. And it will end each module on time with that. To select the information that we think is most practical and most helpful to you as WASH practitioners, but we expect that you will engage with that information to the level that is most helpful to you. In this course, as Kelly said, intended to help you apply the information that we're giving you in this course to your entry contexts and contexts. An additional objective to the amendments also intended to contribute to the greater dialogue surrounding WASH and NTDs, and that the evidence base for cooperation between the two sectors and the knowledge of best practices is still quite limited. So we'd like to use some of the examples that you bring to the course through your assignments to inform the global practice of WASH and NTD collaboration. And consider this a very important aspect of this course. For the first audience for this course, this is its first run. We encourage rich discussion and engagement among all of you as practitioners. It is a wonderful opportunity to have so many countries and practice represented across a number of stakeholders and types of organizations. And we think it provides very rich fodder for discussion among us as a global community working in WASH and the NTDs. So we need you to use the time on these courses to engage in that discussion, and we'll have ample time during each module to do so. We'll appreciate feedback on this course, and your feedback and thoughts and suggestions and additions are welcome at any point. We want to make this a useful tool to WASH practitioners, and so your help in your context, how this information is relevant, will be very useful to us in that sense. Further iterations. Xander will continue to be the facilitator for this course. You are to contact her. You are also welcome to contact me at Carrie Gale. Email address is provided on the first slide here. So very and we would very appreciate feedback. After review of the course as a whole, I hope this is useful to you, and we look forward to your input and your discussion. So I will introduce to you today's speaker. Is director of the Child Worms Program at the Task Force for Global Health in Atlanta. We'll have him talk about the NTDs to give you an introduction. Has been in working in the neglected tropical diseases, 20 years of experience with the Center for Disease Control in the U.S. looking at disease called lymphatic filariasis, which we'll touch on in this course, as well as now several years as the director of the Without Worms program, specifically at soil-transmitted helminths, otherwise known as intestinal worms. So he heard, and we're very honored to have him present this first course. He is dedicated to the role of compassion in global health and greater understanding within the global health community, a strong advocate for holistic and sustainable strategies for disease control, strategies that include WASH as a foundational element. Man to kick off this course, and we're very excited do, I'm going to ask to Dr. David Addiss. Many thank you again, and we look forward to your
Good. Thank you very much for your very introduction, and thank you for all the participants, all of you who are attending, and your questions and the presentation. I'm trying to see. Today we'll focus, as Stephanie mentioned, on some of the NTDs. We'll actually cover a small subset of them. What are they important? What are public doing about them? And why should you and the sector care? And then we hope to have a rich session of questions and discussion. Look very concerned question. World Health designated 17 tropical diseases considered neglected. And established people have different lists, and you could put some of these together. You could some of them are parasites, a few are bacteria and color viruses. Conditions that are on a list of neglected, but they were so neglected that they didn't even meet the WHO list of the 17. The 17 neglected tropical diseases were brought together for a variety of reasons, including because they promised us on their own to generate funds needed to address them. You can see diseases that are in red, and we will be focusing on. Diseases are diseases of neglected people around the world, primarily in tropical countries, and a cycle of ill health and poverty. In poverty, and they contribute to poverty. And they're a major factor reduce so they affect not only health, but also development. We have other things in common. It's called preventive chemotherapy. Preventive strategy, other treatment for large populations that's done irrespective of the individual. So people in a certain area has an NTD, by treating in that area or targeted groups such as all school children, can reduce in the population and in some cases eliminate the disease. So there are NTDs that are addressed through preventive chemotherapy, and the World has been a champion of this strategy for years. TH, trisomiosis, trachoma, and lymphatic filariasis. River blood, I'm not going to talk about, is also addressed by preventive chemotherapy. Many of the 5 shown here also have water, sanitation, and hygiene. The is related to wash, or this is perpetuated because of them. And in addition to the 4 middle, guinea worm is one of them. So the diseases on the right, including the middle, that are related to inadequate wash. NTDs is that they tend to cluster of these 5 NTDs in, and you can see the country in brown, orange are ones where 5 of the NTDs are present. So they cluster not only in poverty, but geographically. Back a minute, we can see there's 4 major types of interventions that are useful or address NTDs. We've mentioned of chemotherapy, and that major strategies. It can be very effective in the short term and developed by the World Health Organization and other partners. And in fact, pharmaceutical donations by some of the pharmaceutical companies have been factored in elevating preventive chemotherapy to such a powerful strategy. In addition, there's other control because many of these diseases are spread by mosquitoes or other animal vectors. Well, the focus of our display. And then clinical care is important because just action for some of these does not reverse or eliminate the disease. So when we're looking at neglected tropical diseases, we see components of care that are there. Some diseases only require chemotherapy, other diseases require all 4 interventions. Well, let's take these now. We'll try to tour through the effects of the diseases and give you a sense of what are, how related, and what we're doing about them as an NTD community. Helminths, which are for intestinal worms that are spread through contact with soil. There's the worm, Ascaris, whip or cura, and there's 2 different species of hookworm. These cause malnutrition on the left side, and on the right you see that were in the stool of a child who was treated with deworming drugs. Transmitted helminths, or STH, are also spread geographically, similar to the overall NTDs. And the dark red show countries in which more thirds of the children require annual treatment or preventive chemotherapy. NTDs and benefits of deworming for the helminths having improved physical growth in children, improved nutrition, not only in terms of weight and weight gain, but also micronutrients. Some studies deworming leading to increased learning and educational benefits, better cognitive function, and some studies show that in children wormed developed later in life. Considerable evidence to show that even though these will cause mortality, as Steph mentioned, they a very important long-term health element impact. Primary age has preventive therapy for deworming school-age children, and this with drugs donated by Mabendazole, Johnson, and albendazole by GlaxoSmithKline. There's also groups that purchase these because they're relatively inexpensive. So for soil transmitted helminths is actually fairly common, and the estimates that about 2 million children last year were dewormed and they were reported to WHO as having been dewormed. In part, are driven, and blue bars showing worm load per person And you can see the highest worm burdens are in children 5 to 10 years of age. On average, in this one study from Myanmar, almost worms per child were found in other age groups. Are in a period of rapid growth and development, and so worm burdens have the greatest effect. And in addition, provide a platform for that's inexpensive and to use. In fact, school teachers, and this provides an health education and hygiene education as well. The problem is that if only preventive chemotherapy is given and the change in hygiene, the reinfection of transmitted helminths. The shows that after treatment every year, the levels, the number of worms go down dramatically, but as children are re-exposed to the transmitted helminths through the contaminated soil. And burdens will decrease with treatment, but they return. 3 years of treatment, if there's no treatment, the transmission is at a level as it was before treatment. So what is the role in ADH? In part, consolidate the gains that are made possible through drug treatment. Primary prevention. And a recent group at the Swiss Tropical Institute reviewed studies that have been done looking at the impact of sanitation on that the availability of sanitation facilities was with protection against STH infection. Reduction in children infected. Currently, at Emory University and the Task Force for Global Health are access to safe water and hygiene have a very similar effect. So each of treatment, even in preventive chemotherapy, water and hygiene can have a dramatic effect on. The next disease is called schistosomiasis. It's also a disease, and it's caused by a worm known as schistosoma, which is a fluke or a worm that lives in the body. Worms live in the large veins of the pelvis, and the worms live in the intestinal veins, and the worms live in the veins around the bladder. The abscess is caused by an immune reaction to eggs, not by the worm itself, but as the in the veins, the females produce millions of eggs, and these direction to them cause disease in humans. Is also the areas that we've already seen. The use of schistosomiasis are primarily in Africa and some in the East. The worms are distributed more widely, including Americas and in some parts of Asia. The exposure to contaminated water and the through the skin. The swarm of the parasite or schistosomiasis water the human skin actually to burrow through the skin, and the adult worms, as I mentioned, live in veins. They make millions of eggs, which find their way either into the intestine or intestinal form bladder for the urinary form. These water, and if not prostration and water, they into the water supplies where they have snails. Parasite infects snail to further inform urticaria that can then infect humans. And so you have two opportunities to prevent this cycle of infection: sanitation and water supplies, preventing infection of water and therefore snails, and in clean water, which will prevent exposure of contaminated water. Unlike this does cause death. People who are infected with schistosomiasis, about 85% in Africa. It's estimated 2,000 deaths in Africa occur annually due to liver disease, which can be quite severe, blood in the stool, in the urine, as urinary form is bladder cancer. In terms of disease, schistosomiasis is unlike some of the other neglected genetic causes significant. The control for the soil transmitted elements, therapy with drugs, in this case donated by Merck's and the praziquantel. Sanitation modification, life cycle are also very, very important. There's also control against the snail vector, and this snail removal and larvicides to snails. So some completely get because of the persistence in the water and in the snails, and graded interventions are the most effective. There are impact of clean water supplies on schistosomiasis. For example, reform of schistosomiasis declined from 12% to 0% over a 13-year period when water supplies were brought in. And in Ghana, reduced incidence in children from 30% to just over 4%. And this point for schistosomiasis, exposure occurs through skin contact with water. So you have to clean sanitation. Sanitation is not only important, but also access. In addition, not only the intestinal form, but the form. Being in water is an important mode of transmission and is very important to deal with, not removal of feces or separating from animals. The impact of the intestinal form is less clear. Eggs don't pose of schistosomiasis transmission, so they can be effective. But bathing is affected, can release the schistosoma organisms and the eggs into water just from contaminated clothing or skin of people who are infected. Focus on is trachoma. Unlike diseases we've mentioned, trachoma is caused by a bacteria, trachomatis. This is a cousin of the you may be familiar with that causes genital disease. But the chlamydia affects and the conjunctiva, or the lining of the eyes and pertaining of the upper eyelid, repeat to formation and actually becomes scarred and ashes begin to rotate inward. This is called trichiasis. And of the on this pen begin inward, and as the eyelashes turn inward, and with each blink of the eyelashes irritate the eye, the cornea, and this leads to blindness. This can be a condition. Ultimately, it affects the cornea so much that becomes blind, as shown in the right eye of this person. It's largely distributed in Africa at this point, with 300 million people at risk, more than 1 million have been from trachoma. Trachoma is spread flies to the eyes of living in areas where there's the chlamydia from person to person by being attracted to the eyes, picking and then flying and affecting the eyes of cells. There can also be by contaminated fingers or towels or other articles of clothing. The human feces, but latrines, and the rates are in children, age 2 to 5 years old. There's a blinding trachoma by 2020, and a very balanced strategy called SAFE. E stands for surgery for people who have the inversions so that the damage stops. And targeted preventive chemotherapy is done with these antibiotics. Adding face washing to other measures is what's recommended, and then mental change to increase access to water and sanitation. Disease called lymphatic filariasis. People are infected in more than 70 countries, and it's the second leading cause of disability worldwide. One of them is lymphedema, or swelling of the tissues, largely in the leg, and Addiss, which results in long-term sustained lymphedema and from repeated bacterial infections of the these that in Haiti. The transfer from to humans, the worms live in human lymph and made and produce large numbers of microfilaria, or microscopic worms, which are picked by the mosquito and become larvae that are capable of infecting humans. So the transmission is from one person to another through the mosquito. Again, this pretty much tropics, large, about a third of the infected populations are in Africa and about a third in South Asia. The lymphatic filariasis has two major functions: to move large molecules and waste products and excess fluid from the cells and the tissues. So if you get the swelling, as we see with lymphedema, but the other lymphatic system is to fight infection. So that or germs enter the skin, they're taken to a lymph node where they're processed and the infection is prevented. If the people to these bacterial infections, and you see in the photo is one of these infections in somebody who has filarial lymphedema, that bacteria could not drain properly and be processed in a lymph node. And infections are the cause of the progression of lymphedema in its to the very severe forms that we saw just a minute ago, known as psoriasis. Filariasis is an annual treatment of all members at risk, and this strategy is to stop transmission by 2020. About filariasis with the that have been donated, and this program is progressing well. The other program is to care for people who already have the disease. And the drug treatment doesn't do very much to reverse the disease. So what's required to prevent these bacterial infections that lead edema to elephantiasis is very hygiene, teaching to care for their skin, especially for the lead between the toes. Actually wash because the lymphedema is so severe, so they need some assistance. For the skins through these lesions, especially between the toes, is very important. So into water and skin care is very important. Let's see worm disease. This is a very ancient parasite. It's actually been found in some of the Egyptian mummies. It also by water, and it's a disease that has been targeted for actual untreated stagnant water, ponds or cisterns or beds. By small water fleas or copepods, and an worm exists. These the dracunculus larvae in them. When treated water, the which of the water fleas are in the stomach. And the next year, these worms, the worms, find their and they mate. The female worms of a year might apply the skin, often in the foot, where they blister in the skin, which is very painful. And the larvae that they want to expel through this blister, the blister people are drawn to water to put it into the water for relief. And the female worm releases the larvae into the water with the water fleas, and the cycle continues. It's recommended to be extracted. This has to be done very carefully, just a little bit every day. Wound care that is often required, but there's no vaccine. So the disease is to prevent exposure. Safe water, protected wells, streams or rivers that are flowing rather than stagnant. Wide filtration of these water supplies has been important in the guinea worm eradication effort. It turns out a small nylon mesh filter is adequate to filter out the fleas or the copepods and make the water safe. There's side chemicals that kill the water that is used in some areas. Eradication has been very dramatic. In at least 3 million cases. In 2012, only 500. And it's now down to 4. And guinea worm can be eradicated in the next couple of years. Let's move a short section on water NTDs. I don't know how with New York, but are very fond of their self being very sophisticated and worldly. And a magazine cover of the New Yorker magazine a few years ago depicted what it looks like to the typical New Yorker. And they are close to them. The building on Manhattan Island in New York, there's a lot very familiar. But just the river on the island, very vague and undefined. See, which is the state of New York, has structures, but there's no. You get to the other end of the and you very vague awareness of anything beyond that. And this made it to me how we tropical diseases tend to regard WASH as that's important. We know we need water sanitation and hygiene to be, but we have a vague understanding of what it is and of what it is and the complexity. We seem to look it all together and say, well, of course, WASH, but we don't have a very detailed understanding of that you do and the complexity of it. Between NTD sector and WASH, we see differences and some similarities. They're certainly similar, although you tend to focus more on human rights, inter-equity, and development than with NTDs. In district level, where they often work at the community level. For us, is done periodically. So for one, for example, where WASH work is much more continuous. Limited community engagement, and it's episodic, maybe when we're mobilizing communities to take mass treatment, but the WASH is much more constant. The cost of the NTD sector considers to be low cost and WASH intervention be higher. That means state. We tend to areas where many of the NTDs are, whereas it includes urban areas. And finally, we need WASH to reach our goals. Where, at least from where we sit, it's not that you and WASH sector need the NTDs as much as we need you, and we may want to come back to. In 2012, there were 30 experts in both sectors that gathered at the Melinda Gates Foundation, but could share vision for both NTD and WASH communities. And this is disease-free communities that have adequate and equitable access to water, sanitation, and good hygiene. And outline shared interests in 4 areas. And some of the activities that could be done here are providing coherent messaging to funders and to the public. Training area or domain of collaboration and crime, as we're now, is one of those potentials. People in the sector know very little about WASH, as I just mentioned, and we could benefit from that. Data collection and monitoring, which will be one of the modules in this course, and the activities there include coordinated mapping and perhaps shared indicators and shared databases to make our work sectors more effective. And their end is to identify STH and WASH research benefits and the effectiveness of combined interventions. Round in the NTDs, and I believe this was part of your course materials. The rationale for WASH and NTD collaboration. As I've mentioned, success for NTD control requires WASH. No doubt about it. And these diseases be shifted from just control to elimination or eradication. And for WASH in order to be successful with those ambitious goals. We've worked more or less in similar geographic foci and work with neglected populations. We'd like to begin with the collaboration with NTDs benefit WASH. What does it look like from your perspective? Could serve as health indicators for the WASH sector. There are a lot by NTD control programs. These are infections, and unlike diarrheal diseases, which have to be monitored weeks to get good incidence data, these are long-term. Monitoring could be done at one point rather than just continuously. We'd be able to share the data we're collecting with you for advocacy and fundraising to reach our shared goal. Those that do a little bit in the NTD sector and you do WASH, that we can collaborate on, where we're both in an area, but by combining forces, we can be more effective. Training might be one of these areas. Sanitation, education, and training. Monitor. Are there collaborations? So, for example, integrating face washing into hand washing and hygiene education that we can address and look at together. WASH interventions have the greatest impact on the NTDs. Stephanie graphically described this as one of amplitude. And those familiar with physics know that if waves are in each other, amplitude. Of communities that are disease-free, adequate and equitable access to WASH, we can see the effects of our efforts at greater amplitude. I'd like to thank you very much for your questions and comments. Thank you.
We have two questions, and this question comes from CRS Ethiopia. The question: what kind of TD collection are having environmental ministries in some of the countries Dr. Addiss has worked?
There actually is some act underway. One of us is finding out about how this activity is taking place and highlighting it and publicizing it. The collaboration is happening and through community-based groups. The people who are involved in implementing some of the programs are also those who are engaged in WASH and sanitation. So, at the we perhaps than we do at the national and international levels. I also upon the specific disease. For example, coma with its very strong the entire SAFE strategy. There's a lot more collaboration with the WASH sector. One in Ethiopia, I'm sorry, I don't know the specific areas of Ethiopia, but there's a very round up of the for trachoma that is supported by NGOs and by the Ethiopian government. In this mapping, that is finding out where trachoma at-risk communities are and identifying them for instance. Data collected on the primary indicators for water and sanitation, and so where data on WASH at the time mapping is being done for trachoma. Step available thoughts on other examples of this type of collaboration?
It's a question, and as David mentioned, there's not current literature on best practices of between the WASH and NTD communities, particularly at the implementation level. But we have begun to collect those case studies of successful collaboration and to some degree starting to look for dialogue around best practices, and of examples that we would happily share with the coming weeks of some of those collaborations. And in particular, Dave mentioned the trachoma mapping project, which is a wonderful instance of collaboration at a global level. We've been of collaborations in Ethiopia level between organizations such as Water Aid Ethiopia and Orbis International, which is an organization that concentrates on preventing blindness and disability. Organizations have actually come together to trachoma in the southern region of Ethiopia, and a number of mechanisms that allowed that to happen. At the district level, the two organizations, Orbis sought out Water Aid to conduct the elements of trachoma prevention. To share more details on exactly how that collaboration started as well. And I think we may have members of the Ethiopia group in this discussion that could potentially comment as well as many of you may have other similar examples. I'd be happy to share some of those case studies we've collected, but would very much appreciate your additions to those.
Stephanie, we have similar collaboration of the two sectors in the past. What are the obstacles in the past?
Great question. And I think there are factors that relate to that. I think us in health and want public health, we like things that we can do we just once and we can move on to something else. We like fixes and cures. About the public health sector recognizes the overwhelming importance of water, sanitation, hygiene for human health. And we are often a model that isn't as comfortable with the societal and other factors that are good wash. I think in many ways this is a cultural difference. People in neglected tropical diseases where there's an effective for rapid improvement have people on the planet impossible. And so the sense of what to do now is move forward with the preventive chemotherapy and both the WASH sector and that are easier than improving WASH, and perhaps idea that really is such a complex that equipped to deal with it as a sector. So, the development of a different culture. And in the early days of tropical medicine, water hygiene was an integral part of it. But I think technology improved as nations have improved. There's been a same in the between two sectors.
Great. From people. Thank you so much for your participation. Specific about certain diseases. Do is compile all questions. And for this document, because we only have the questions coming. So the question we want to ask, and this comes from some contrasted of the NTD sectors. Its role is much more than traditional measures for WASH programs. Yes, how can these two sectors work together to address this issue?
You're accurate. If answers have been, for example, number of latrines, to cite using the joint program standards, or I think that is correct. However, the NTD sectors are quite to collect. For example, can be observed very quickly examine people in the community and look at their eyes. Indicators, for example, urinary schistosomiasis, people see urine. Indicators that are simple to collect. These, there are also ones that are more complex that involve parasitics, stools, or testing blood. TD sector, there's been an effort to identify rapid assessment tools, so people if they have blood in the urine that can to map, monitor large areas quickly. I think taken, and one of the areas we need to work together is to identify what kind of monitoring might be useful and useful for you in the WASH sector that isn't too complex. So I think the area for implementation.
Great, thank you very much. We know that in the audience who work either with Addiss or other organizations in school health, and so if working in schools or working with diseases or part of another program you work with. And some shared about collaboration in their countries. In Nigeria, a good collaboration between the government and education program, have collaboration between WASH and guinea worm to be introduced where the nutrition program work as both very close to each other.
I'm calling from Sudan. I just maybe some observation. I mean, as clearly said that there's been some kind of collaboration between what years that have been there, but been clearly missing constructive interventions as illustrated by one of the uh, this accord is redefined between sectors rules in addressing uh, uh, I mean also reflected in the way how the goal development is being achieved. If you look at the trend of the really you realize that the global of these NTDs much of MD is actually behind the schedule that there's a lot of work to be done to so how to collaborate best.
For that comment, I agree with you completely that we don't work with each other across sectors. Often we use different concepts and a very deep understanding of the needs, motivations, and goals of each sector, and language that we use is going to be critical for the deeper collaboration that we actually need.
I think that last point was an excellent one, and I think as we look back over the history of NTD control, and I think guinea worm is a great example of that. It's been ongoing, and very much in the 1990s was there were efforts for guinea worm eradication. And there were attempts at the time to increase collaboration with the WASH community in order to provide safe access to water in areas where guinea worm was highest. We look back over that commission, and there were very troublesome or difficult elements of that. And I think there's excellent work being done. Many countries have coordination between their disease control programs and WASH. Example, I think, as you said, a very clear need for much clearer mechanisms for that collaboration is that we often have general types of collaboration or general commitment, but on the ground, the practical elements aren't always coming together. We don't always know where the communities they have disease, what their WASH situation is. We're not able to allocate the resources and the attention to those communities to ensure WASH access. Challenges on the ground, and some of this dialogue over the past 2 years has been to define what are the tools and what are some of the approaches that we can begin with to that when we know that a disease is present, that we're able to approach with that knowledge, as well as how can the sector in the communities in which it's already engaged, and we take that NTD information into account. Both are good work, but also potentially augment or add elements contribute to NTD control. So I think that's a really excellent point, that we should continue to learn from the past, and we should compile all of these experiences, and also be talking very concretely beyond the need for collaboration. How exactly do we do it, and what motivates the WASH and NTDs to collaborate?
Does anyone have any comments to add? Please feel free to yourself and share your experiences with us. We received one of your comments. WASH sectors concerned with implementation, and that less attention perhaps has been given in the past to school wash, but that the school platform has very much been focused with other countries related to integrating into platforms and also integrating with NTD control.
Okay, so full participation. All of a great question. Thank you to Stephanie Ogden tuning in from joining us from all different parts of the world. Taking time this morning to start our first course, and want that we are recording all of the questions that you sent us, and we're best to send answers to you for those we did not get a chance to address here. Meeting together again next Tuesday at the same time. Comments or other feedback about today's session, please feel free to email me. This is Alexander. My email, as you all know, is kellytesh@gmail.com. And we will keep it longer for those who want to contribute questions to the chat box or to discuss among themselves. So thank you, everyone, joining us today. Slides and the report of today's session via email for those that or for those who join later. Great. Thank you so much. Bye.
This course on NTDs and WASH to advocate to country policymakers, especially related to NTD and WASH sector for effective collaboration. Again, is there an initiative at the country level to among policymakers for WASH sector? There are instances, again, in which at the policy level there are stakeholder groups that are coming together. The Task Force for Global Health and many of the disease control programs are outspoken advocates of WASH as a foundational element of control. I think one of the areas of opportunity, and this would largely be at a national level, is for the NTD communities and the WASH communities to come together and to decide how to advocate together to elevate both of those issues. That is, for the WASH sector as a powerful, you stand up and say that the NTD are important, and the P sector within the health sector, which often receives a greater share of funding at national level than WASH does, is just we need to invest time and money in WASH as a foundation for these diseases. There's not a specific initiative to conduct this type of training. We are hoping that the information presented in this course and in the manuals that we're about to release, which are country-specific manuals for WASH and NTD collaboration, where some of that information will allow stakeholders at the national level to gather and advocate at the policy level.
That programs in a much in a better way when mental approach because free communities with NTDs equitable access to equitable and adequate access to what again the mechanisms globally is that I mean what the goal that these and I mean the collaboration that we are trying to establish in the two sectors.
Yeah, one as a that work in the WASH sector. I think we understand that the goals of our programs are to some degree driven by donors, so and driven by the overall sort of primary goals of the program. In some cases, as you stated, that's emergency WASH work, which is, of course, naturally a short-term intervention, immediate, often control, actually. There are types of interventions that have, health outcomes or educational outcomes, or most often do simple access, increased access to water and sanitation infrastructure as the goal. That tends to be the primary goal of many WASH programs. I think very right that this is the way that can work together, because the WASH is not a single key. It is many different types of interventions with many different types of goals. And I think it's a transparency about that. Many WASH programs that are interested in disease control and having that impact. And I think what the NTD community offers is a way to measure that impact in ways that we haven't ever been able to before. So this is an opportunity for them to look at the NTDs and say, we have a demonstrated health impact. We can use that to influence our donors on one hand and to also form our own programs, but that we have to and collaboration is most strategic. Will fit into our overall program goals, which are to be influenced. So I think you raise a really complicated question, and I think we've seen in the dialogue is that it takes the stakeholders coming together at implementation level and being able to discuss those issues. Here's the benefit for each program to coordinate, and in a term sense, how do we work at that policy level and the advocacy level and on some of those mechanisms for our own programs to ensure that we can enable collaboration in the future much easier. The idea of WASH and health, again, as we know they're very related, but can we those in some of our concrete program and objectives such as monitoring, and reporting? Can we start reporting those things? And I think that's fun. To all those of you that have stayed on for additional discussion, as Kelly suggested, we're going to compile all of the questions and provide as best we can to those questions and make them available to all of you. Your time, we'll end the session here and follow on any as well during the next session. We'll have a few minutes to address questions from if you have. So thank you all for coming and for participating.